ongoing debate as to whether the Irish were the first slaves in the Americas, predating the first black African slaves by almost a decade. Slavery is perhaps one of the oldest profit-making endeavors in human history, and the Irish were a special target for 1,000 years.
Throughout history, the Irish were persecuted by one faction or another, to include enslavement and indentured servitude. When did the Irish first become slaves? How long did the selling of the Irish continue? Who was responsible?
Hello, I'm Colin Heaton, former soldier, Marine Corps Scout Sniper, history professor, historian and book author, and we will answer these questions and other issues on this segment of Forgotten History.
Some groups deny the Irish slavery under English and later British rule, claiming that this was nothing more than voluntary indentured servitude, which did exist. However, there are counter-arguments that will be challenged here. There is a legitimate dispute as to the numbers enslaved, especially during the 17th century before the Act of Union in 1707. The official British legal terminology used was indentured servants. Whether the servants in question had willingly signed the indenture contract to emigrate to the Americas or were forced to go. Many were forced. Therefore, those transported unwillingly and effectively sold were not considered to be indentured. This included political prisoners, vagrants, convicts, political activists, thieves, prostitutes, or people who had been defined as undesirable by the English government. The Irish introduction to slavery was during the first Viking raids in the year 795, lasting through the mid-9th century. This period saw the Irish killed and enslaved. Just like many other societies, the Vikings attacked. Most of these early raids were along the northern and eastern coast using hit-and-run tactics. The Vikings would then flee with treasure and slaves and return to either their holdings in Scotland or back to Norway. Usually, many slaves who were of value were ransomed back to their families, but others remained in captivity. Then, from the year 837 onward, larger targets such as the greater monastic towns of Armagh, Glendalough, Kildare, Slane, Clonard, and Clonmacnoise, and Lismore were hit by larger forces. These large-scale raids generally spared the smaller local churches and villages far inland, but slaves were still taken, mostly to Scotland and Iceland. In 875, Irish slaves in Iceland launched Europe's largest slave rebellion since the end of the Roman Empire, when Hrólfr Hólmarsson's slaves killed him and fled to Vestmannaeyjar. In 841, the port that became known as Dublin was taken and occupied by both Olaf and Ivar the Boneless, and by 853, this part of Ireland was a Norse trading center, and slaves were a large part of it. The slave trade did not stop with Ivar's death.